I went on my first hot tent winter camping trip, and boy did I make a bunch of rookie mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to tell you all the lessons that I learned so that you don't make the same mistakes. Now, I'm kind of a checklist geek. I make checklists for everything, especially trips like this, because I don't want to forget anything. I've done that often enough where I head out for a backpacking trip or a camping trip, and then I realize that I forgot something. Well, that's pretty much what happened on this trip. There were things that I just didn't foresee, so I didn't have it on my list. But there were also things on my list, but for some reason, I just, even looking at the list, thought, well, I'm not going to need that item, so I didn't take it. And of course, I ended up needing it. Oh, so I guess you could say that was a lesson that I learned. I didn't have that on my actual lesson list that I was going to talk about. Stick with the checklist and make sure everything is on the checklist. Oh, and by the way, if you're a checklist person also and you'd like a copy of my checklist, just leave a comment down below. I'll be happy to send you one. I've got checklists for backpacking, tent camping, hunting, and now even winter camping.
I've been hiking in the snow before, and I know it's more strenuous. I've even been hiking in the snow with weight. This is way more strenuous than I was anticipating.
Well, the first official lesson that I have on my lesson list for you is to be aware of the fact that the conditions where you're going may not be like the conditions where you are. The mountains outside the city where I live don't have a whole lot of snow, and for some reason my brain just projected that onto all the mountains in the Rocky Mountain West, I guess. I don't know. For whatever reason, I didn't factor in that there could be snow where I'm going, even though there's not snow where I am. So I get there and there's 4 to 8 inches of snow on the ground that I have to trudge through, and I'm not prepared for that. And it took way longer for me to get to where I wanted to go than what I was expecting, because hiking through snow is a lot more challenging than just hiking on a dry trail. Lesson number 1, where you're going may not be like where you are. That's almost like a life lesson. So lesson number 2 is to actually get started much earlier. It's a new tent that I was trying out, right? I haven't ever used it up in the mountains before. And I knew that the tent stakes weren't going to go into the frozen ground. So I thought, I'm going to have to go get better tent stakes. REI doesn't open until 10 o'clock. So I get to REI, then I have to stop and get gas. So this all made everything take way longer than what it should have. And I'm in the mountains. So the sun's going to go down behind the mountain much sooner than it does when you're not in the mountains. So it's a race against clock to get everything set up, find a camp spot, collect firewood, cook food. Plus, I've got a 55-pound pack on, so I'm not moving as fast as I could. Lesson learned. This one was a big one. I should have gotten started much earlier. So lesson number 3 for me was to not experiment with a place that I've never been before, right? I'm trying winter camping for the first time, and I chose a trail that I'd never been to before. I didn't know if there were going to be camp spots. I didn't know if there was going to be a water source, along with the other mistakes that I made, especially getting started so late. It was just a recipe for a bad trip. I should have gone somewhere that I was familiar with.
Trailhead was a mile further away because the map I was looking at showed that there was a road that went to the trailhead, but the road doesn't go to the trailhead. So I had an extra mile hike. The sun's about to go behind the mountain, and I still have to collect firewood, still have to get water, get the tent set up. This is not a good trip so far.
So lesson number 4 is actually another really big one, because it's important, and that is to know where your active water sources are. So the map showed that there was an active water source, which there was. I found that creek, but it was 6/10 of a mile away from where I eventually ended up setting up my camp. So I had to hike all that distance back to get water. If I had not gone somewhere where I'd never been before, I would have known that.
My first attempt at hot tent camping is a failure. Oh man. I was trying to get to this spot where it shows that it was fairly level, and relative to everything else it is. Every piece of ground that I found from the trail that looks like, oh, that looks decently level, when I get on it, it's got too much slope to it. All this work, hiking miles through the deep snow, and I got to turn around.
Since it was getting to be pretty late in the day and the sun was about to dip behind the mountain and I wasn't finding any camp spots that I thought would work, I knew I was going to have to head back down the trail. So initially I was thinking, I'm just going to have to give up on this trip. It's just not working. My first attempt was a misfire. After coming back down the trail and trying out several different camp spots, seeing if they would work, they're not going to work. They're either, there's too much slope on them, or there are too many things buried underneath the snow that you can't see because of the snow. I eventually did find a camp spot further down that was relatively level. I mean, it still had kind of a slope on it, but I thought that I was able to find an area in that spot where the slope wasn't too bad. Turns out it was just like a mile and a half from the truck, so not far from where I actually started from. By this time, the sun was down, it was getting late, it was probably after 4:30, and I knew that I still had so much to do. Not only did I have to get the tent set up, but I had to cut firewood. That was a priority also. And I still needed to eat, I needed to get everything set up inside of the tent. It was going to be a long night. By that point, getting a fire started was a really high priority because my feet were soaked and I wanted to be able to dry out my socks, try to dry out my boots. Plus, I wanted to eat and I needed to get a fire started inside the stove so that I could heat up my dinner.
Put forth all this effort to get here. I was just determined that I was actually going to set up camp. Don't let pride compel you to pass up good camping spots looking for better camping spots. I could have saved myself miles of hiking and just set up camp here first. Still a lot more to be done. Lessons learned. I guess I'm all ready for bed, finally. It is 9:23, and I just got into the tent and got settled. I still need to organize the tent a little bit, but good night. I mean, here I was wondering what I was going to do with all these darkness hours. You know, I figured it's going to be dark at 5 o'clock or 5:30. What am I going to do for 4 hours? Well, what did I do? I cut wood and cut wood and cut wood, and my supply is just, it's not going to make it through the night. I'm having to add wood to the stove about every 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And to top it all off, I don't even have socks. Why didn't I bring an extra pair of socks?
I have high boots and gaiters, although I'm not wearing either of them for this trip. Again, for whatever reason, I just didn't even think about the fact that I'm going to be walking through snow, more than likely. Here I am on a winter camping trip in the Rocky Mountains, and I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm going to be walking through snow. And so I've got these low boots, no gaiters, walking through sometimes 8 inches of snow when I'm trying to find my camp spot. And of course, all that snow is just going right down in my boots and completely soaking my boots.
Guess it's time to finally go to bed. I am exhausted. Well, sounds like it's starting to snow a little bit. And I left my pack outside, thinking, what harm could there be? It's not going to snow. Clear skies. And my shoes are still wet and frozen. Socks have dried out, though. I got smart and I hung them up at the top of the tent where all the heat goes. So it's toasty, 65 degrees in here.
I've got my water filtration system, and it's a gravity feed system. So I've got a bag for dirty water and a bag for clean water. You fill up the dirty water bag, hang it, attach a hose to it, and then run that hose to your clean water bag. Well, I went down to the creek and filled my bag up with water, and then I needed to do something and I needed both hands. So I took the water bag and I set it down in the deep snow, thinking, hey, that'll be cool because the deep snow will keep it standing upright. It won't fall over and spill all the water. So I did that, grabbed the bag, hiked back to camp. You know, it's cold, it's below freezing. By the time I got back to camp, the snow had gotten in the valve for the filtration system where you connect the hose and froze. So now I can't get my hose into that valve so that I can then filter the water that I went to collect in the creek. Well, I hadn't been able to get water the night before because I was rushing around trying to get my tent set up and eat and cut firewood. I was really, really dehydrated and I needed some water badly. Then I had to try to work with that valve and try to clear that ice and snow out of there. Thankfully, finally, I was able to get that cleared out so that I could plug that hose in and actually start to get filtered water. So, quirky little lesson that I learned right there. Don't set the water bag down in the snow. How would I have ever even thought that through? ahead of time. So overall, for my first hot tent winter camping trip, I thought it went pretty well. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes, but nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, nothing life-threatening. And I learned a bunch of lessons for my next trip, but I did some things right, so I take those away as wins. I'm glad I prioritized getting the firewood cut, because that enabled me, like I said, to get all of that done and get enough cut, and it lasted me all night long. So that was actually a real blessing. I didn't have to try to get up during the middle of the night and collect more firewood. I'm really thankful that the tent stayed warm all night long, because since my socks were wet, I was barefoot. Well, another thing I did right was bringing a nightjar. On warm weather camping trips, I don't really need to bring a nightjar, but I was really glad that I had one. If you don't know what a nightjar is, let's just say it kept me from having to put on my soaking wet frozen boots and leave the tent during the middle of the night. I'm glad that I thought that one through at least. Thankful that I brought chocolate. That's always the right thing to do. So overall, I'm really thankful that I didn't give up on this trip. I'm glad that I persevered, found a spot to set up the tent, and just made it happen. It was a good adventure. I'm glad I did it, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.